All right, welcome everyone to this first episode of Biostim Meet Up. Biostim Meet Up was launched to create a space where we can discuss challenges, hot topics, and have a conversation about a variety of topics in the biostimulants scene. My name is Anouk. I am the head of marketing at KelBlue, and I will be the moderator of this session. This session will be recorded, so in case you don't want to be in the screen, please turn off your cameras and then there will be no issues. The recording will be sent to you as well after this webinar. Today we will be talking about seaweed and farming. So can seaweed help build healthier soils and stronger crops? There's been a hot debate, at least from our end, on what types of seaweed are there and what are the differences between these main types of seaweed in agriculture. So for that reason, we decided to bring the conversation to a webinar format so that we can so that you can also have a space to ask your questions. On this note, I would like to really encourage everyone to ask their questions in the Q&A chat. We will be discussing as many as we can in the limit of time that we have. So please go ahead. And the question that I will be asking our two guests to the webinar is, what seaweed species deliver the greatest benefits for crops and why? And then especially we will be looking at Eckolonia Maxima, Ascophyllum Nodosum, and Macrocystis Pyrifera. How we will be doing that is through this little agenda that we have here. We'll be introducing the speakers. We'll quickly go through the different types of seaweed as well, so that everyone is on the same page. And then we'll go into questions worth asking. So these are questions that we have gotten from posts online, but also emails we've received. And of course, again, please write your questions in the Q&A chat, and then we'll also be discussing those. Here they are, our esteemed speakers. I'll start with Luis. Welcome, Luis Lombana, who's the CEO of Ficostera, which is a Spanish company, marine biotechnology company that manufactures products for the agro industry based on marine algae extractions. Thank you so much, Luis, for being a part of the webinar. Would you like to say a couple of words?
Well, pleasure meeting everybody, and thank you, Anouk and KelBlue, for inviting us to present or participate in this webinar. Well, you already make a quick presentation. We are a company which uses mostly Macrocystis and Laminaria. We will be coming later for more arguments in order to explain why we understand that these are an excellent source of active principles for the agriculture.
Great, thank you very much, Luis. On the other side, we have Valentin Pitiot, who is the head of agribusiness at KelBlue. In case some of you don't know, but KelBlue cultivates giant kelp on large-scale offshore structures to rewild our oceans, lock away carbon, and create a range of high-performing biostimulants to transition agriculture to more sustainable practices. Welcome, Valentin. Would you like to say a couple of words as well?
Sure. Thank you, Anouk, for the invite, and thanks a lot, Luis, also for joining. Looking forward to discussing about the different seaweed types, cultivation processes, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, before we start going into the questions that everyone has for our speakers, I would like to quickly go into the history of seaweed in agriculture. As some of you might or might not know, seaweed has been used for thousands of years and really across all different continents on the planet. It's only in the 1960s or 80s that there actually became a lot of scientific studies that were released about seaweed, and we saw that they contained a lot of bioactive compounds that influence plants' physiology. However, unfortunately, because of a lack of regulation, so biostimulants were positioned as a fertilizer in the market, there was a wrongful positioning in the market. So people assumed because it was registered as a fertilizer that this would that the biostimulant would replace a fertilizer product. There was some confusion about this, and then around the years 2000, 2010, there was more and more research that got available, and so today that has led to a more regulated market with, for example, we have in the EU, but the USA, India, Chile, we have new regulations all around the world where we have a good distinction between biostimulants and fertilizers. As you can see, these regulations are quite new, so we are starting a great new era of biostimulants. So as already mentioned, these are the seaweeds that we will be talking about during this webinar. So I would say let's dive right in. Eckolonia Maxima, we mainly find hormones in this type of seaweed. We can find it in temperate coastal waters and has a moderate growth rate of about 1 to 2 centimeters a day. It's typically used as a plant growth stimulant, and most of it is wild harvested as opposed to cultivated. Then we have Ascophyllum Nodosum, which contains mannitol, laminin, and polyphenols, mainly found in the North Atlantic rocky shores, and has a very slow growth rate of 2 to 10 centimeters a year, this time, not a day. And this is more used for abiotic stress tolerance. We see that 80 to 90% is wild harvested instead of cultivated. And then we come to the last one, Macrocystis Pyrifera, mainly includes alginates, sugars, or laminarin and fucoidin. We can find it in temperate coasts worldwide and has a really fast growth rate of about 30 centimeters a day. It is mainly used for improving plant metabolism and yield. Now, as we can see, 50% of Macrocystis Pyrifera is wild harvested. So that's still quite a lot, though more is being cultivated. That's enough for the introduction on my side. I would say everyone's really excited about the questions that we are going to be asking our audience, our speakers. Sorry. So I would like to start this question with Valentin. This has been a question that we've received widely at CalBlue, at least. Why should farmers care whether a product comes from wild harvesting or cultivation? Does it actually change anything for them?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Anouk, for the question. Luis, you can of course complete what I'm going to say. I think if we look at the different seaweed source, there are two types for now. There is wild harvested seaweed and there is cultivated seaweed. If we look at the wild harvested seaweed, for example, in Europe, it's mainly Ascophyllum. And there are some interesting facts about it, is that it's either harvested directly in the ecosystem or usually harvested on the beach. And these are some sometimes challenges when it comes to maintaining the quality of the product because of the weather temperature that is changing a lot depending on seasons, especially in France, for example, but also in northern region. And this has some indeed challenges when it comes to maintaining the quality of the product through the year. With cultivated seaweed, this is something that is a bit more interesting in terms of the supply, because you have two different types of cultivated seaweed. You have cultivated on lines, where you will harvest all the seaweed, and then you can kind of guarantee a bit more your supply. And then you have cultivated seaweed, like I was doing, for example, where you only harvest 20% of the canopy. And this is super interesting in sense that you can not only guarantee a constant quality, because the fluctuation is way less than if you do beach cast, for example, but also you can guarantee the supply, and on top of it, have an access to blue carbon sequestration or marine biodiversity boost. So for farmers, what it means is that when they get product from cultivated seaweed, they can ensure a bit more, a certain consistency in the product through the year, but also ensure that the carbon footprint of the product is a bit lower, while also contributing to restoring marine ecosystem. I know, Luis, for example, you have a great product, also using some seaweed, different seaweed from wild harvest. Also, how do you manage actually to keep the supply and the quality consistent through the year?
Well, thanks, Valentin, for the question. I fully agree with you. I would also like to add that the benefit of having cultivated seaweed over wild harvested, it is not only the supply, but also the quality of the supply. I mean this because seaweed it's a developing body, and it in principle, or in specific, in the case of sugars, sugars develop alongside the life of the seaweed. So if you want to have specific extractions, give you an example, laminarins or fucoidans, laminarins develop alongside the life of the seaweed. And it is very important to take, if you want to get a maximum of laminarin, to give you an example, it is very important to take the seaweed in the moment that compound is in the peak. This, of course, is much more easy when you have your lines, when you have your farm, your cultivation available, than if you have to go out in the wild. In the farm, you know when you cultivate, when you seed the seaweed, therefore you can anticipate when is the maximum peak. You can also take a sample. So if you go to detailed and specific extractions, which I believe we are going to be speaking a lot in this webinar, if you go to specific extractions, not to generalized extractions, it is very important to understand the time of maturity of the seaweed. And in this case, it is, of course, of crucial importance to have control over the cultivation of the seaweed.
And I think that's thank you, Luis. I think that's a great bridge for our second question that we have. Luis, perhaps you can explain us a bit more. Does the extraction method have an impact on the performance of biostimulants? Continuing your train of thought earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is, if you want to take whatever active principles from the seaweed, you need to understand what is the development of the plant, of the seaweed, as we just explained, but also how you want to take it. For example, if you want to take phytohormones, phytohormones are usually active compounds which significantly get degraded with aggressive or hard extraction techniques. So if you want to go to phytohormones, you need to go to either fluid gas extractions or cold extractions, pressure extractions, where heat it is not happening. Of course, I mean it's the extraction method is going to be able to absorb or to take specific principles of the seaweed. Seaweed is a very, very rich in many compounds, and depending on what you want to take, it is very important the process that you apply for extracting these active compounds. So the answer is a clear yes.
Okay, Valentin, would you like to continue this thought? Do you agree?
Sure. I would also complete what Luis just said. But basically, indeed, if you use a chemical extraction, for example, type of alkaline extraction, then you have a risk to denature the small phytohormones, which is not the case for pressure, cold, or any other type of mechanical extraction. So where chemical extraction is interesting to increase the yield in terms of production, mechanical extraction can be really important when it comes to improving the bioactivity of one product. And I think another point, I'm not sure, Luis, of what is the pH of your product line, but when we look at alkaline extraction, usually the pH of the product is above 7, 8, which is quite different than with mechanical extraction. For example, we have a pH that is close to 4.5 to 5, and this means that you can easily mix your product with other inputs. So for the farmer, what it means is that if it goes closer to a pH product with pH lower than 6, it is easier to mix with fertilizers, herbicides, and so on. There's a compatibility. And thus, when they apply it on the field, do only one application and not having to do one application of fertilizer, and then the day after, one application of biostimulants, which would be then doubling the cost. So I think in that sense, going for extractions that are helping to get a lower pH does make a lot of sense for farmers.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Valentin. In our case, we do have different lines. with different pHs. The most versatile is the one that we use with fluid gas extraction, which is also very much neutral pH, which can therefore be combined easily with most of the compounds out there. But I agree with you that if you go with aggressive alkaline extractions, such as the ones which are usually or widely used for the Ascophyllum Nodosum, this provides you a product with a high pH, which sometimes will, on the one side, be losing some active compounds, and on the other side will be complicated to be mixed with some products. So I fully agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary as well of both of your answers that you've just discussed. I'd also like to take a moment to thank everyone already for a variety of questions that have entered the chat. So thank you. We will answer them at the end of the webinar, but please don't hesitate to add your questions still to the Q&A part of the webinar. Moving forward with question 3 for Valentin. This is more of a statement that we hear and not so much a question. I used seaweed biostimulants, but it didn't work. I thought all seaweeds worked great. Valentin, what is your comment about this?
Sure. Thanks, Anouk, for the question. Well, I think to start to answer this question, I think different seaweed equal to different benefits. That's, I think, for sure. You have, you were just saying at the beginning, Luis, but you have Macrocystis, you have Laminaria, you have like lots of different seaweed types. What is interesting is actually sometimes to combine those seaweed types to get to different benefits and to increase the kind of spectrum of the benefits. But for sure, like we just discussed, the type of seaweed that you use, the harvest, wild harvest versus cultivated, the process that you use can impact the bioactivity of your biostimulants, and thus if it works or not. And I hope, Luis, you will complete me with this, but from our research and from what we found so far, we've seen that Eckolonia is particularly good when it comes to rooting or early establishments. We have Ascophyllum that is very interesting when it comes to shoot growth, also greening or stress resistance. We see a lot of companies positioning for stress resistance. And then we have Macrocystis, and from what we've seen so far, it's a kind of a good combination of both, thanks to the viscosity of the alginates, which are kind of sugars for plants, so polysaccharides, and the other polysaccharides that we can find in Macrocystis. So yes, so to answer the question, not all seaweed biostimulant works. Some do more than others, depending on the seaweed type, on the processing and so on. And a little tip that I think I would give to a farmer is to always check the registration of the product. So there are some specific registration that are kind of ensuring a certain quality. You can, for example, look at the EU regulation if you're based in Europe, or country registration. For example, like Cablu, we have like France registration, but also EU registration. And in the countries where there is no biostimulant regulation, like for example, currently in the UK, it's a little bit more challenging to be able to understand whether a product is going to work or not. So I would then refer to the type of seaweed, to the processing, to how the seaweed was harvested, when, a bit of traceability to be able to assess it. I know, Luis, you're a professional when it comes to the different seaweed types, and especially Macrocystis and so on, so feel free to complete.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree, especially with you just said about the registration. Registration is very, very important, not also because of legal constraints for the farmers, but also because there you can get a lot of information. My comment on this point is that there's going to be a shift in understanding seaweed. There is already a shift in understanding seaweed. For good or bad, seaweed, in my opinion, has been commoditized in the past 5 years approximately. And then people speak openly about seaweed. We have just defined that seaweed, although it's a big framework, it has many different aspects. You just spoke, Valentine, about Eckolonia. Eckolonia indeed is very rich in auxins and therefore is good in rooting. Ascophyllum is good in mannitol. Macrocystis is very good in alginates and polysaccharides, which in my understanding it's the best combination. But I would anticipate that the market will be shifting from speaking about seaweed to speaking about XYZ seaweed. So I really hope that in the next few years we will be, or the market will be speaking, well, this is an Ascophyllum Nodosum seaweed extract, or this is a Macrocystis extract, because the differences are very good. Our goal, I would say, it is to explain and this is a very good example, this webinar, to explain the market that seaweed is not enough. You need to understand type of seaweed, different sort of benefits associated with each seaweed. This is a challenge because we come from a commoditized use of the seaweed, but provided that the benefits are extremely good, we understand that we have a very good basics to show the market that seaweed XYZ it is the way to move, not just seaweed in general.
Exactly, Luis, and it's an interesting point because I usually talk to farmers and I say, yeah, we have a Macrocystis biostimulant, and they say, yeah, it's another seaweed, right? And I think it's very difficult to have a really good explaining on what are the different seaweed, what are the different benefits, because there is a lack of research. And how do you yourself, for example, Luis, educate farmers or try to help them understanding that there are different seaweed types for different benefits? How to manage this in Spain or also globally?
Well, it's a challenge. It's indeed challenge because, well, the first reaction when you go to a customer is, oh my God, not again another supplier of seaweed. I have many of them. So it really comes to a lot of scientific support, field test support, and at the end of the day, results support. So it's a challenge. It's not easy. It will take time. But as I said in the beginning, provided that the results can be very good depending on what you do, and the farmer is of course more than smart enough to understand these benefits. I mean, the final goal is so good that I would say that we do have a good path, but it's going to be a long and winding road. Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go to the final question that we have available here. Luis, this one is directed to you. Are seaweed biostimulants affordable for farmers?
There should be. Otherwise, there's going to be no market. Yeah, of course. It's part of the industry, how it is developing. If I may give an example of what we did, we developed a technology based on fluid gas extraction in critical phase, which is much more affordable in cost than the supercritical phase. So in order to have good phytohormones at a reasonable and an affordable price. So technology is very much developing. Again, with all these arguments that we are saying of how big the market is and how different it is from one to another, technology is going to be a very important part of the evolution. And seaweed-based biostimulants are indeed totally affordable for the market. In general, I would say that if the product is correctly applied and it's correctly defined, in our experience, we usually have a ratio of 1 to 3 euros. So basically, for each euro that the farmer puts in the crop, he's going to be getting 3 euros, 3 to 5 euros overall benefit, which is a huge return on investment. So the answer is a clear yes.
Great, thank you, Luis. Valentin, would you like to give your perspective here as well?
Sure. I think that's a good point you just mentioned, Luis, the free rule. And there is also another thing that I would like to add is there is price versus quality. So sometimes in the market, you do see really affordable seaweed biostimulants, but those are not necessarily the one working properly. And sometimes you do see really expensive one, and those are not necessarily the one working properly. So I think what is very important for farmers when they look at the price per liter, so for example, a biostimulant that will cost about 10 euros per liter, target price, is to also understand what is the dosage and the number of application. Because if you have biostimulant that is 10 euros or USD per liter, but you need to apply 6 liters per application and 10 application, at the end, your cost per hectares are really high. So it's super important to always read the label to better understand whether it's 1 liter dosage, 2 liters or more, and the number of application, because then you can calculate what is your total cost per hectare. And here you always see a lot of difference because some biostimulants, they enter the market with a really, really cheap price, but with a lot of application because the concentration of the biostimulant is a bit less than others. And some enter the markets with basically high price but low dosage. So then this is something that is super important to understand because this will impact, of course, the overall farm price. And then also on the trials we did, so I encourage you to look at the field trials we conducted with third parties. We always, by the way, compared with Macrocystis with other seaweed type to better understand where Macrocystis is working, where Ascophyllum is working, and so on. What we usually see is on row crops, we can increase the yield by 10 to 15%, meaning that the ROI, so the benefits per hectare for farmer would be around 100 USD per hectare. While on fruits or grapes, table grapes, vine grapes, we usually have much higher increase, usually ranging from 20% up to 30%, meaning that the return on investment for farmers is much higher. So we can talk to some figures around 300 to up to sometimes thousands of euros back. So it really depends also on type of crops and on lots of different things. So yeah, always look at the label and better understand how much product you need to apply to measure your return on investments.
Great, thank you very much, both of you. Important matter of the price and affordability. We will now be going into a variety of questions we've received from the audience. Thank you so much for a long list of questions. We will do our best to reply to them all. I would like to start with a question from Ferdi. Why are some species more widely available than others in the industry? Valentin, would you like to take this question?
I can start with this one. From my understanding, it is all coming from where is the IP, where is the technology to process it, and also what was the seaweed used in the past. So for example, in China, seaweed has been used for decades and almost like centuries, while it's something quite new in Europe. And if we look at the technologies, usually they are available in Europe, and the main seaweed source in Europe is Ascophyllum. We also have other types of seaweed. So this is why today Ascophyllum is quite well known in the market. If you look at other seaweed source like even red seaweed or other seaweed type, the technology sometimes to process it is not available. So this is why those seaweed are just entering the market now. I think it's the case for Macrocystis and for other like Lombana and so on, while Eckolonia and Ascophyllum are in the market since a really long time. So I would say it really depends on the processing technologies that were developed, where they were developed, and also what was used in the past, not only for agriculture, but also for human food and so on. Luis, would you like to maybe to add something?
I pretty much agree with you, Valentin. Macrocystis is, let's say, the new kid on the block, and therefore there's not that many available, but basically because the market is not demanding. This is pretty much what companies like Kelp-Blue and Ficosterra are doing. So introducing a new, I wouldn't say a new product, but a new variation of the seaweed extract in the market. So this is basically the reason that it's more widely used Ascophyllum and Eckolonia, because they have been in the market for longer time. I really anticipate that in the future we will be seeing more and more presence of Macrocystis, more and more presence of Laminaria, and most likely more and more presence of new species which do have some new compounds. So yeah, it's basically an issue of history of the seaweed compared to the new species which are entering the market.
Great, thank you so much for your replies, both of you. I have another question here. Let's see. How does shelf life differ across different seaweed varieties? Luis, would you like to take this one?
Well, shelf life very much depends not only on the seaweed, but mostly on the extraction technique. I mean, shelf life, seaweed, if you take a seaweed and you dry it, that's, and I know this from our agar experience, a dried seaweed can really last years. But I believe that the question of the audience is coming to the extraction, the extract, and this is very much coming depending on the process and depending on the active compounds within the process. So I think it is, it can be a room for a very, very long discussion on this matter, but the availability, the expiry of the active principle, in my understanding, very much depends more on the extraction technique than on the seaweed itself.
Yeah, exactly. Indeed, also if you have a dry powder, usually because you don't have any water in the product could have a longer shelf life. While if you have a product that is quite unstable with a different technology, then sometimes you can only use it within a season. So something we're seeing in the industry is about 2 years. This is quite consistent for the different biostimulants, but some biostimulants can also have a shelf life of more than 2 years.
Thank you.
If I may, just another comment on this. Seaweeds can also act as a coating, meaning for other active principles to increase the shelf life. To give you an example, microorganisms, which usually do have a limited life, microorganisms, microbial complexes used in agriculture, they usually, one of the bottlenecks that they have is that they have a limited life. We have tested that with some sort of extractions, this shelf life can be increased because basically the seaweed, the polysaccharides are going to be acting as a coating for those microbial complexes. So I think this is also a very important benefit of the seaweeds when we talk about the shelf life of the final product. Seaweed can increase shelf life of different compounds when mixed and when processed correctly.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your answers. There's a variety of questions as well about positioning other types of seaweeds versus the ones we just discussed from different people. There is a question of how does tropical seaweed species perform towards Laminaria and giant kelp, but also the role of red seaweeds in the biostimulant sector. Valentin, would you like to take this question?
Of course, I was quite lucky to have a chance to go to Madagascar recently to look at the red seaweed industry, because there is quite a lot of work there for carrageenan, but also starting for biostimulants. And we did some tests also internally with red seaweed, so to combine it whether with Macrocystis or just to use it as a separate biostimulant. There is definitely a growing industry. I think it's a little bit like Macrocystis. Currently in the industry, you have Ascophyllum and Eckolonia, but the red seaweed, such as Macrocystis, is growing because of different benefits also that you can get. The compounds that you have in red seaweed are different. So you have the alginate, for example, in Macrocystis or other brown seaweed, while in red seaweed, you have different compounds, carrageenan, that can help for biotic and sometimes abiotic stresses when it comes to plants. So when we look at the red seaweed industries and tropical seaweeds, like for example, Kappa ficus or even Sargassum, I do think there's interest. I think it's all, again, depends on if they're cultivated or well harvested. We do see Sargassum growing in lots of areas around the world due to climate change, due to the weather temperature of the water. And if the source of seaweed is not the right one, so if there is lots of heavy metals and so on the test we did with third parties, we realized that sometimes the results can be not necessarily very positive. This is specifically for Sargassum and the test we did, but I'm sure if the source of Sargassum is good, then you will definitely have good results. And for the other seaweed types like Gracilaria, Kappa ficus, and other seaweed from Madagascar or Indonesia, there are some really interesting things. So maybe what we will look at in the future is how to combine those seaweeds and how to get basically to get the best benefits out of each seaweed.
Louise, would you like to complement what Valentin said, or shall we move to the next question?
Fully agree with that, but also I would like to add that also green seaweeds can be very beneficial. We are now making some experiments with ulva because ulva contains an active principle which are called ulvans, which in principle may have interesting benefits for the agriculture. So fully agreed. Red, brown, and green seaweed, depending on how you extract it and understanding what you want to extract, can really provide very interesting active principles for the agriculture.
Great, thank you very much. We also have a question coming in from Janine regarding the bioactives that we've attributed to Ascophyllum, Eckolonia, and Macrocystis. She's wondering whether these figures come from published literature or our own analyses, and if the extracts compared using the same extraction method, raw materials, and processing conditions. Let's see, Louise, would you like to take this question?
Well, there's a lot of public information. There's a lot of scientific information and growing, which I think it's a very good news because the more scientific information we have, the better we can develop the industry, the better farmers can understand. So part of the question is, yes, there's a lot of public information and scientific information. Each company, we also do have our own literature. Ficosterra does, Kelp does, all of us do have our own internal literature. And then when it comes to combining the final product, well, each of these products do have different extraction techniques. So I don't think it's realistic to say that we are combining one or different type of seaweed with exactly the same extraction technique. So I believe that this is very much depending on market proposals from each of the corporations.
Thank you, Valentin. Anything to add to this?
It was a good answer. A lot of literature, Ascophyllum and also Eckolonia, and lots of coming literature on Macrocystis, and lots of internal also research with third parties. So those are accredited agencies from governments doing trials. And yeah, I really invite you to look at the trials that we conducted so far, to look at the differences. And if you have any questions and you also want access to full reports, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to share it with them.
Great, thank you very much. We also have a question from Jorge for Valentin specifically. How would you rate the balance between carbon sequestration versus carbon footprint, specifically knowing that Stimblue is cultivated in Namibia?
Yeah, it's I really like this question actually because it's a challenging one. I think just if we come back to the business model of Stimblue, we want to cultivate seaweed, especially Macrocystis, in different parts of the world. So we have one factory and seaweed farm in Namibia, but we are already starting to establish another one in New Zealand. We also want to have another one in Alaska, in Chile. The goal to be basically a global company to supply the local markets, so that we would have we would be able basically to reduce the footprint of shipping products in different parts of the world. I think today, if we look at, for example, the European markets, and coming back to your question, what we're doing is that we're working with scientists on getting a methodology completely approved. So this has been done already. So now we are quantifying the amount of carbon that our seaweed farms are sequestering. And with this, we can offset our emissions on the different scope to ensure that when the product is arriving on the farm gates in, for example, in France or in the UK or any other countries, then we have a neutral or almost negative footprint, which is super important because then farmers can use the product in their farms without adding an extra footprint. And if I can also complete this, most of the biostimulant that we're seeing in Europe is also coming from South Africa, for example, with Eckolonia, Canada with Ascophyllum, and also some other part of the world. So indeed, there is a footprint, but we're working towards reducing it and, of course, balancing it also with different formulations. So what you can do is to have a seaweed with higher concentration, meaning that you ship more and more solid products, which will, of course, reduce your footprints. So this is something super important for us and one of the top priority just to ensure that we balance our emissions.
Great. Thank you, Valentin. I'd like to finish with one question directed at Luis before going into the conclusion. From Arantxa, as we've seen in this webinar, not all seaweeds have the same agronomic value. Luis, could you share 3 reasons why it makes more sense to use biostimulants for Macrocystis Pyrifera extracts instead of the more common ones like Ascophyllum Nodosum or Eckolonia Maxima?
Well, very much is going to be depending on what you want the seaweed for. As we said before, Macrocystis, I would say, has a wider use compared to Laminaria, to Ascophyllum or Eckolonia. Definitely, my understanding is that the effects of the alginates, the effects of the polysaccharides contained in the Macrocystis is very, very useful for the plants. There are many benefits, which I'm afraid we are running out of time, but basically the alginate content of the Macrocystis over Eckolonia and over Ascophyllum, I would say this will be the best short answer to this question.
Great. Thank you very much, Luis. I would like to move now to the conclusion of this webinar. As indeed we have 1 minute left. Thank you, of course, all very much for all your questions that made this debate such an interesting one. If you feel like your questions have not been answered, please reach out to us. I'd like to summarize this webinar by just quickly going through the main takeaways that we can take from this webinar. One is the difference between wild harvesting and cultivation of any species of seaweed. Another one is also to take the extraction method into account, so chemical versus mechanical. Another important point is to understand that every type of seaweed has different benefits. So we use different varieties of seaweed for different purposes in agriculture. I would say that that's mainly it. Thank you very, very much for a great and interesting 45 minutes with us. And I'd like to give the floor one more time to Luis for a final closing statement.
Well, again, thank you very much, the audience, for attending the presentation. Thank you very much, Kelplu, for inviting us to be part of this presentation. As I said, we anticipate that there's going to be a big change in the way seaweed is understood by the farming community the next year. So hopefully seaweed will be accompanied by XYZ seaweed, understanding that each of them is going to be having different benefits. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Valentin, would you like to give a final closing statement as well?
Sure. Thanks, Anouk, for the webinar. Thank you also, Luis, for joining, and everyone. Really happy to share additional data on the trials we conducted. And please do reach out if you have any other questions, if you'd like to schedule a call to go through anything. Happy to share all the data we have. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, guys. See you next time. Thank you, Luis.